He saw her at the market, and his heart stopped. It was the same face he believed he had lost forever, but what she told afterward turned the past into redemption and pain into promise. Subscribe to the channel and discover how this encounter changed two destinies forever. The Marajoara market was buzzing under the Amazonian morning heat. Colorful stalls displayed forest fruits, river fish, and indigenous crafts, while voices mingled with the sounds of birds from the nearby forest. For Ibere, however, the entire world fell silent when his eyes found that face among the stalls. A young woman was organizing baskets of acai and cupuaçu with delicate gestures that seemed to dance in the air. Her profile, silhouetted against the light, struck him like a precise arrow. Features identical to Urema's, a woman he had seen leave years before during the brutal attack by land grabbers on the Tembe village. Ibere's heart skipped a beat, while his wrinkled hands tightly gripped the carved wooden staff that supported him. It wasn't possible. Jurema had been taken by the invaders during the confrontation when they tried to defend their sacred lands. For years he believed she had gone forever on that bloody day. The old Paje trembled, feeling the weight of memories. His 70 years seemed to double on his shoulders when memories of that day returned. The screams, the fire in the huts, the despair. He had tried to save Jurema when the men dragged her away. He fought as best he could with his ancestral knowledge, but was struck down and left behind, carrying the guilt of not having been able to protect her. The young woman at the market smiled at a child who approached her stall, and that smile was like seeing a materialized ghost. Ibere stepped back a few paces, partially hiding behind a board of medicinal herbs. He needed to be sure. He no longer trusted his tired eyes, nor the heart that so desired a sign that not everything was lost. A boy of approximately 5 years circled around the young woman, holding a small wooden turtle. The woman bent down to the child's height and adjusted a lock of hair that fell over the little one's eyes. A simple gesture, but one that made Ibere swallow hard. It was exactly how Jurema used to do with the children of the village. For 3 consecutive days, Ibere returned to the market. He bought nothing, did not approach. He merely observed from afar, like someone trying to decipher an enigma woven by time. He discovered that the young woman was called Mayara, and that she sold fruits harvested from a small farm on the outskirts of the village. The boy was the son of a neighbor whom she looked after while the mother worked in another part of the market. On the 4th day, while observing the young woman arranging a buri tea basket, Ibere did not notice when his staff slipped and fell with a dull thud on the beaten earth. The sound made Mayara raise her eyes, and their gazes met for the first time. Something in her look changed, first curiosity, then recognition, finally a shadow of apprehension. Ibere remained motionless, like a heron at the riverbank, not knowing whether to retreat or advance. It was she who made the decision. With determined steps, Mayara crossed the space between the stalls, stopping a few steps from the old Paje. Her face was partially covered by a red scarf, but her eyes, those eyes that Ibere would recognize anywhere, stared at him with a mixture of defiance and unease. "Why are you following me, sir?" she asked without fear in her voice, while adjusting the scarf that protected part of her face from the sun. The question hung in the air like mist over the river. Ibere felt his throat dry. The words he had kept for so long now seemed stuck, somewhere between his heart and his lips. "I knew a woman named Jurema," he finally said, observing every minute reaction on the young face before him. "You have her eyes." Mayara did not respond immediately. Her body stiffened and her fingers pressed the scarf more tightly. The silence between them grew, dense like the closed forest. "How did you know her?" she finally asked, her voice lower, more controlled. "We were from the same people," Ibere answered, feeling the weight of the words. "I was there when the land grabbers invaded our land. I tried to save her." Something changed in Mayara's gaze, a sudden understanding, a recognition. Her eyes widened slightly, and she took a step back as if she needed space to absorb what she had just heard. The small boy approached, pulling on Mayara's skirt, momentarily breaking the tension. "Aunt Mai, the turtle is hungry," he said, raising the wooden toy. Mayara automatically smiled at the child, a smile that did not reach her eyes still fixed on Ibere. "In a moment we'll feed her, Tuco," she replied, stroking the boy's hair. "Go play a little more near Donna Zefa's stall, yes? I need to talk to this gentleman." When the boy moved away, Mayara took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "You are the page," she said, not as a question but as a statement. "The man who fought for the Tembe when the lands were invaded." Ibere nodded, feeling a wave of emotion rise in his throat. How could she know? Before he could ask, they were interrupted by a group of buyers approaching Mayara's stall. She looked back, visibly torn between the conversation and her work. "My house is on the road that leads to the river after the great Suma Uma tree," she said, quickly. "The last one before the bend. If you want to know more, come at dusk." With these words she moved away, returning to her baskets and fruits, but her gaze continued to follow Ibere as he slowly walked away, leaning on his staff, carrying more questions than answers, but also something he had not felt for a long time: hope. The sun was beginning its descent when Ibere finally spotted Mayara's house. It was a simple construction of wood and straw, elevated from the ground by stakes like traditional riverside houses, protection against the river floods that governed life in that region. The large nearby Sumauma tree cast a generous shadow over the beaten earthyard, where some chickens pecked peacefully. A small drying rack beside the house displayed manioc drying in the sun and fishing nets hanging. Ibere hesitated before approaching, feeling the weight of uncertainty. What if he were mistaken? If it were just coincidence, a cruel joke of fate? He breathed deeply, seeking strength in the ancestral spirits that had always guided his steps, and advanced along the narrow path that led to the house. Even before he reached the door, Mayara appeared on the small veranda. She had changed from her market clothes into a simple cotton dress, and the scarf that had previously covered part of her face now rested on her shoulders, revealing a thin scar that ran from the corner of her left eye to the beginning of her chin. Her black straight hair was tied in a side braid. "I thought you wouldn't come," she said, descending the wooden steps with lightness, despite the evident tension in her gaze. "The elderly usually rest at this hour." Ibere felt the corners of his mouth lift in an involuntary smile. "Too much rest for one who carries heavy questions," he replied, adjusting his body on the staff worn by time and use. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with unspoken words, interrupted stories, possibilities. It was Mayara who broke it, gesturing toward the veranda. "I have fresh coffee and beiju. We can talk sitting down." Mayara's small house was clean and organized. In the main room, a rustic wooden table occupied the center, flanked by two equally simple benches. The walls displayed woven baskets and a bow with arrows, kept as relics, more than as instruments of use. In a corner, an improvised shelf housed schoolbooks and some herb jars. Mayara served coffee in enamel mugs and placed a basket with beiju on the table. Her movements were precise, but Ibere noticed the slight tremor in her hands. "You said you knew my mother," Mayara finally spoke, sitting across from him. "How do you know she was my mother?" The question was direct, challenging, but her eyes revealed vulnerability. Ibere held the mug between his wrinkled hands, feeling the coffee's heat through the metal. "I wasn't certain." "Until now," he replied, observing her reaction. "But your eyes, they're the same, and something in the way you move." He paused, choosing his words. "Jurema was our healer. She knew all the plants, all the secrets of the forest. She was respected by everyone in the village." Mayara lowered her gaze to her own hands. "She didn't die that day," she said softly. "Not as you thought." Ibere felt his heart accelerate. He had imagined so many endings to Jurema's story, none of them good. "What happened to her?" Mayara rose and went to a wooden chest in the corner of the room. She returned with a faded cloth bundle that she carefully placed on the table. She unfolded it, revealing a necklace of red and black seeds, a small leather notebook and a handful of yellowed letters. "She was taken by the invaders," Mayara began, touching the necklace as if it were something sacred. "She was wounded, but managed to escape during the night. She walked through the forest for days, bleeding but determined to survive. She was found at death's door by a priest, who was passing through the region on a mission. Ibere closed his eyes for a moment, visualizing Jurema wounded, alone in the forest. The pain and guilt he had carried for so many years seemed even heavier now. Father Anselmo took her to the convent in Santarém, Mayara continued. The nuns cared for her, but her injuries were serious. It was there that she discovered she was pregnant. She paused, looking directly into Ibere's eyes. With me. The old page nodded, absorbing the information like one receiving a blow long expected. Your father, he began hesitantly. Mayara's eyes hardened. He was one of the invaders, she said firmly. She never spoke about it. It wasn't a story to tell a child. Ibere felt the old anger resurface, but pushed it away. This was not the time for hatred. She stayed at the convent until you were born? Yes, the nuns welcomed her despite everything. My mother helped in the medicinal herb garden. Her knowledge was valuable. After I was born, she tried to start over. She acquired this land, began planting, selling at the market. Mayara picked up one of the letters and opened it carefully. But the wounds never completely healed. She departed when I was 7 years old. Ibere noticed how Mayara avoided the word death. He respected her choice. How did you know about me? He asked. Mayara smiled slightly, the first genuine smile since they began talking. She told stories about the village, about the traditions, about an old page who faced armed men to save her. She pushed the leather notebook toward Ibere, and she wrote all this, so that I would not forget who I was, where I came from. Ibere's hands trembled as he touched the notebook. It was like having a piece of Jurema back. May I? He asked. Hesitantly. Mayara nodded. Ibere opened the notebook with reverence. The pages were filled with Jurema's delicate handwriting, drawings of medicinal plants, remedy recipes, traditional songs, and stories of the Tembe people. It was an invaluable treasure, a legacy of knowledge that he believed lost forever. She wanted to return, said Mayara, observing the emotion on the old man's face, but she feared bringing danger to the village. The men who took her were still looking for lands to invade. Did they return? Asked Ibere, feeling a tightness in his chest. Mayara's face darkened. They're returning now, or at least their sons, their followers. She stood up and went to the window, looking outside as if she could see the threat approaching. 3 weeks ago men came here. They said this land has an owner, that I have until the full moon to leave. The full moon was only 5 days away. Ibere felt the weight of history repeating itself. Why didn't you seek me out? He asked with more force in his voice than he intended. I didn't know if you were still alive, Mayara replied, sitting back down. Besides, this is no longer your fight. Ibere struck his staff on the floor forcefully, surprising them both. This has always been my fight. I promised your mother I would protect her, and I failed. I will not fail again. For the first time, he saw tears in Mayara's eyes, so much like Jurema's. I don't want anyone else leaving because of me, she said, her voice breaking. I saw my mother suffer for years with the memories of that day. I couldn't bear to carry that weight again. The sound of dogs barking in the distance interrupted the conversation. Mayara stood up quickly, alert. It's them, she said, fear evident in her voice. They usually pass by here in the late afternoon, observing, marking territory like hungry jaguars. Ibere joined her at the window. In the distance, a pickup truck was raising dust on the narrow road. How many are there? He asked, calculating. Possibilities. 6, maybe 7. The leader is called Romero, son of one of the men who invaded the village years ago. Ibere felt his blood freeze. It was as if time had come full circle, bringing him back to the starting point. But this time, something would be different. This time, he would not fail. Come with me to the village, he said, holding Mayara's hands in his. There will be greater in number. I can speak with Chief Raoni, organize a defense. Mayara hesitated. The village still exists, after everything? It exists, smaller, further into the forest. But it is our place. Your place too, if you want. The pickup truck passed slowly in front of the house. Men looked through the window. One of them pointed and laughed. The message was clear: we're watching, we're coming. When the vehicle disappeared around the bend in the road, Mayara took a deep breath. "I need time to think," she said, still looking at the trail of dust that was settling. "There's the farm, the plants, the animals. Time is the only resource we don't have," Ibere replied, feeling the weight of urgency. "The full moon is coming, and with it, they too." Mayara turned to the old page, her face a mask of determination and fear. "Come. Back tomorrow at dawn, I'll have an answer." As twilight tinged the sky with red and gold, Ibere made his way back to the small inn where he was staying. His steps were slow, but his mind was racing. Finding Mayara, discovering that Jurema had survived long enough to give birth and raise her daughter, it was more than he had ever dared to hope. Now, however, the past threatened to repeat itself like an unexorcised curse. He would not allow it to happen, not this time. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Ibere made a silent promise to Jurema, wherever her spirit might be. "I will protect your daughter with my own life. This time, I will not fail." Morning arrived wrapped in dense fog, rising from the river like restless spirits. Ibere woke before the sun, his bones protesting against the humidity that penetrated the inn's walls. His dreams had been populated by faces from the past, Jurema smiling while preparing herbal remedies, children running between the huts, and then the fire, the screams, the blood. He rose, determined not to allow the shadows of the past to materialize again. On the small table beside the bed, he arranged the few belongings he had brought: a ritual maraca made of gourd and seeds, a handful of healing herbs wrapped in banana leaf, and a necklace of jaguar teeth that symbolized his position as APACHE. He put everything in a woven straw bag and went out into the fresh dawn air. The path to Mayara's house seemed different under the diffuse light that precedes dawn. The trees cast elongated shadows on the damp ground, and the birdsong grew in intensity as the sky brightened on the horizon. Ibere felt the presence of the forest around him, alive, vigilant as it had always been. He was still a few meters from reaching the house when he noticed smoke rising from the improvised chimney. Mayara was already awake. More than that, she was in motion. As he approached, he saw that the veranda was filled with baskets and sacks. An old and patient donkey waited tied to a post, with 2 straw panniers already attached to its back. The door opened, and Mayara came out carrying another basket, this one containing what appeared to be carefully packaged seeds in small cloth bags. Upon seeing Ibere, she paused for a moment, then continued her work, placing the basket with the others. "I decided to go with you," she said simply, adjusting the knot that held her braid. "But I'm taking what is rightfully mine." Ibere nodded, respecting her decision. He approached to help with the preparations, but Mayara stopped him with a gesture. "First, I need to show you something." She led him inside the house, where the table had been moved aside to make room for a large map drawn on the beaten earth floor with charcoal and annatto. It was a detailed map of the region, showing the river, the communities, the original Tembe village, and the current location of the rebuilt village further north. More impressive, however, were the red markings indicating locations where the invaders had established camps in recent months. "How did you get this information?" asked Ibere, crouching with difficulty to better examine the map. "I'm not just Jurema's daughter who sells fruit at the market," Mayara replied with a touch of pride in her voice. "I know every inch of this land, and I have friends. Riverside, dwellers, hunters, even some miners who don't agree with Romero's methods." She pointed to a spot on the map where several red lines intersected. "They're gathering here at old Colonel Braga's farm. There are already more than 20 men, perhaps 30. They have weapons, chainsaws, tractors." A knot formed in Ibere's throat. History was really repeating itself on an even larger scale. "What are they seeking besides land?" he asked, knowing there was always more behind the invaders' greed. "Timber, initially. Then there are rumors of gold." Mayara traced a circle around an area near the current village. "But mainly they want this, the sacred land where our ancestors are buried. They believe there's a treasure hidden there." Ibere closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the gravity of the situation. The sacred land was the spiritual heart of the Tembe people, not just a physical place, but the connection to their ancestors, to their history, and the threat against you. Why do they bother with a small farm? Mayara smiled humorlessly. My farm is in the way, and more importantly, I have the original maps and deeds of the demarcation. My mother hid them when she fled. She lifted a loose floorboard and removed a bamboo tube sealed with wax. These documents prove that the lands legally belong to the Tembe people. That's why they attacked her that day. She was the guardian of the maps. Ibere felt a wave of hope arise amid the fear. Legal documents were a powerful weapon in the white man's world. This could change everything, he said, extending his hand to touch the bamboo tube with reverence. We need to take them to Chief Rayoni immediately. Mayara stored the tube in a leather pouch that she firmly tied to her waist. There's something else you need to know, she said, hesitating. Romero's son, Kawe, has been seeking me for months. He says he wants to help, that he doesn't agree with his father's methods. Her eyes reflected doubt. I don't know if I can trust him. Trust is like a seed. It needs good soil to germinate. Ibere replied thoughtfully, but sometimes the son doesn't follow the father's paths. I've seen this happen. He observed Mayara's face carefully. Do you feel something for him? Mayara looked away, returning to occupy herself with the journey preparations. Feeling is different from trusting, she replied, enigmatically. But if he really wants to help, he could be our bridge to an agreement without bloodshed. The mention of blood made Ibere shudder. The memories of the previous massacre were too vivid. How much time do we have until Romero fulfills his threat? He asked, helping Mayara carry one of the baskets outside. 3 days until the full moon, she replied, looking at the sky that was rapidly brightening. But they won't wait that long if they discover I'm going to the village with the documents. Time was their enemy now. They needed to reach the village before Romero's men realized they had departed. The journey would not be easy. A full day's walk through forest trails, avoiding the main roads where they could be seen. Is there someone you trust to send a message to the chief? Asked Ibere. It would be good if they knew we're on our way. Mayara thought for a moment. Donazefa's son, Tiao. He can take a shortcut by a river, arrive before us. She quickly wrote a note and handed it to Ibere. Can you take it to him while I finish arranging the last things? Donazefa's house is the first after the river bend. Ibere agreed, hurrying as much as his old knees allowed. He found Tiao fishing at the riverbank, a strong young man of about 16 who readily accepted the mission after reading Mayara's note. Tell the chief we're bringing the demarcation documents, instructed Ibere, and that the invaders are preparing for an attack larger than the previous one. Tiao nodded seriously, tucking the note into his shorts pocket. My mother told me about what happened in the old village, he said, looking at Ibere with respect. You are a legend among our people. Ibere shook his head. I'm not a legend, I'm a survivor. Now go, boy. The future of our people may depend on your speed. As he watched Tiao's canoe move away downstream, Ibere felt a growing unease. The breeze carried a strange smell, not just the usual aroma of the forest and river, but something more. Smoke. Still distant, but unmistakable. Someone was burning forest upstream. With a bad feeling, he hurried back to Mayara's house. He found her closing the door, a determined look on her face. She had changed the simple dress for sturdy pants and a long-sleeved shirt, clothing more suitable for the journey ahead. They're burning the forest to the north, said Ibere, pointing to the thin column of smoke that was now visible above the trees. It's not a coincidence. Mayara followed his gaze, her face hardening. It's a warning or a distraction. She quickly checked the panniers on the donkey and adjusted the bag she carried over her shoulder. We need to leave now, by the ancient trails. Avoid the main path at all costs. Before they could move, the sound of an approaching engine made them both freeze. A motorcycle appeared around the bend in the road, raising dust. The rider slowed down as he approached the house, finally stopping a few meters away. He was a young man of about 25, tall and broad-shouldered, with the tanned skin of someone who spends a lot of time outdoors. His dark eyes quickly examined the scene. The loaded panniers, Mayara and Ibere ready to depart. You're fleeing, he said, turning off the motorcycle's engine. It wasn't a question. Mayara stepped forward, placing herself between the newcomer and Ibere. "What are you doing here, Kawe?" she asked, her voice controlled but tense. "My father sent men to check if you're still here," he replied, dismounting from the motorcycle. "They're less than half an hour away." Ibere studied the young man carefully. Romero's son didn't seem threatening, but he also didn't show the submission of someone coming in peace. His eyes, however, when looking at Mayara, revealed something. Beyond duty, there was concern there, perhaps even something deeper. "Why are you warning us?" asked Ibere, leaning on his staff as if he were just a tired old man, but ready to use it as a weapon if necessary. "I don't agree with what my father is doing," Kawe replied, keeping his eyes fixed on Mayara. "I never have. This land has an owner, I've always known that." He took a step toward Mayara, who didn't back away. "I came to offer help. I can take you by a path my father doesn't know. You'll reach the village before nightfall." Mayara and Ibere exchanged glances. The offer was tempting but dangerous. Trusting the enemy's son could be their salvation or their ruin. "How do we know it's not a trap?" asked Mayara, her hand instinctively touching the bag where she kept the documents. Kawe smiled sadly. "You don't know. But if I wanted to betray you, I would just wait for my father and his men to arrive." He looked at the sky, where the column of smoke was growing thicker. "That fire is not a coincidence. They're surrounding the region, closing all escape routes." Ibere felt the weight of the decision. His instinct told him to trust the young man, but experience had made him cautious. "If we come with you, what do you gain from this?" he asked directly. "Besides Mayara's gratitude?" Kawe's eyes met those of the old page. "Peace," he replied simply. "I'm tired of carrying my family's legacy of blood. I want to end it once and for all." Mayara stepped forward, standing face to face with Kawe. "If you're lying, if it's a trap," Kawe interrupted her, taking her hands between his. "I would never lie to you, Mayara, not after everything." He stopped, as if he had said too much. The moment of intimacy did not go unnoticed by Ibere, who began to better understand the nature of the relationship between the two. The decision, however, was not his to make. He looked at Mayara, waiting. She took a deep breath before nodding. "We'll go with you," she said, withdrawing her hands from Kawe's. "But if I notice any sign of betrayal—" "There won't be," he assured, quickly returning to the motorcycle. "Leave the donkey. We'll proceed on foot through trails too narrow for him. Take only the essentials." While Mayara quickly reorganized her loads, selecting what was truly indispensable, Kawe approached Ibere. "I knew your story," he said quietly. "My father told it as a warning, to show what happens to those who oppose the Vasconcelos, but for me it was always an inspiration." Ibere studied the young man with new eyes. Perhaps there was hope after all. "Sometimes the river needs to change its course to continue flowing," he replied, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Your courage today may change many lives." Kawe nodded, visibly moved by the old man's gesture. The distant sound of engines broke the moment. "Let's go," he said urgently. "We don't have much time." When they entered the forest by an almost invisible trail, the sun was already high in the sky. In the distance they heard shouts and the noise of vehicles approaching the now abandoned house. Mayara looked back one last time, her eyes moist but determined. "My mother fled to give me life," she said softly. "Now I flee to honor her memory and protect our people." Ibere gently squeezed her shoulder. "It's not flight, Mayara, it's return. You're going home." The trail narrowed ahead of them, winding through the dense forest. Kawe led the way, occasionally cutting branches with a machete to ease passage. Time was running out. The full moon was approaching, and with it the confrontation that could determine the fate of the Tembe people. Once again. At dusk, the Amazonian forest created a mosaic of golden light between the leaves as the trio advanced along almost invisible trails. Ibere, despite the fatigue in his ancient bones, kept a firm pace, his spirit strong like the centenarian Suma-Uma trees. Kawe guided the group with confidence, occasionally stopping to check marks on trees. "Tembe hunting trails," he explained to Mayara. "My grandfather taught me to recognize them before my father could teach me to hate them." The bitterness in his voice was evident. "We're close to the sacred land," murmured Ibere, feeling the presence of the ancestors in the air. "Look," Kawe finally whispered, pointing to the glow of fires among the trees. The Tembe village was just ahead. Mayara stopped, emotion overtaking her face. It was the first time she saw the place her mother had come from, where she should have grown up if fate hadn't traced another path. Circular huts surrounded a central courtyard where a large fire burned. Before they could approach, they were surrounded by armed Tembe warriors. An older man with a headdress of red and yellow feathers advanced. "Pahe Ibere," he said, recognizing him. "The spirits said you would return. We didn't expect you to bring a Vasconcelos." Raoni, the chief, led them to the village council where Ibere told the whole story, and Mayara delivered the demarcation documents her mother had protected with her life. "This can save our land in the white men's courts," said an elder, "but it won't save us from the men who come with weapons and fire." Kawe offered his help, knowing his father's strategies. Although with hesitation, the council accepted. The next morning, they performed the welcoming ritual for Mayara. Painted with sacred patterns of Genipap and Anato, she received a seed necklace identical to the one she had inherited from her mother. "Jurema was the healer's daughter," explained an elder. "This necklace symbolizes the knowledge of healing plants. Your mother took an identical one. Now you have two, a complete link with your ancestors." Silent tears ran down Mayara's face as she connected to a legacy she had never imagined. Preparations. For the confrontation accelerated when Kawe returned from a reconnaissance expedition with grave news. "They are closer than we thought. They will come tonight. They won't wait for the full moon." Ibere prepared a sacred rapé for Mayara, made from the same plants your mother used to communicate with other spirits, he explained. When Mayara inhaled the mixture, visions emerged, her mother smiling, the river flowing eternally. A certainty grew within her. "It's not through war that we'll win, but through truth. I need to speak with Romero Vasconcelos." As the first confrontations began in the forest, Mayara showed Kawe a silver medallion with the Vasconcelos family crest. "It was my mother's," she explained. "I never understood why she kept it, and until now." With unwavering determination, she convinced Ibere and Raoni to let her go, accompanied by Kawe to Romero's camp. When they arrived, they were quickly surrounded. Romero Vasconcelos, a burly man with graying hair, looked at his son with contempt. "My son, a traitor." Mayara introduced herself, daughter of Jurema of the Tembe people. The name made Romero falter momentarily. "Jurema has been dead for years, and if you are who you say you are, then you are the daughter of a rape." "No," replied Mayara, revealing the medallion. "I am the daughter of a forbidden love between Jurema and your father, Augusto Vasconcelos." The silence that followed was absolute. Romero fixed his gaze on the family medallion that his father always wore. Mayara handed him a yellowed envelope. "Letters," he wrote to my mother. "Read them. Learn the truth about your father." As he read by the firelight, Romero's face transformed, from disbelief to painful understanding. "You are my sister," he finally said. "Half-sister," Mayara gently corrected. "And Kawe is my nephew." "What do you want from me?" asked Romero, his arrogance dissolved. "That you honor your father's memory with justice, not violence. The Tembe lands legally belong to our people, and that you accept that your son has chosen a path of peace." In the village, Ibere observed the nearly full moon, feeling that something important was happening. The sacred rapé connected him to the ancestors. He saw Jurema smiling, young again. "It is done, my friend. Your daughter has found her way." At dawn, an unusual group entered the village. Mayara and Kawe in front, followed by Romero Vasconcelos, without weapons, just a man facing a newly discovered truth. "The spirits have spoken," said Ibere. "The cycle of violence ends today." In 4, the months that followed, an agreement was signed. Romero recognized the rights of the Tembe over their ancestral lands. Mayara remained in the village, learning the traditions and medicinal knowledge that had been her mother's legacy. With Iberê as her mentor, Kawe found his place between two worlds, building bridges where before there had only been walls. On a quiet afternoon, Iberê observed Mayara and Kawe sitting by the stream, their hands touching with restrained affection, their gazes sharing something deeper than words. He smiled, feeling a peace long unknown. The river always finds its way back to the sea, even when forced to change its course. And sometimes destiny returns, in a twisted and late manner, what it once took away. If this narrative about forgiveness, reconciliation, and the strength of family bonds touched your heart, leave your like and subscribe for more stories that reveal the beauty of Brazilian ancestry. Share in the comments which moment resonated most with you, perhaps Mayara's discovery, Kawe's courage, or Iberé's wisdom. As indigenous traditions